talking about patience. And we are here. Okay. Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque said that the crosses by which we are afflicted take their source in the cross of Christ, and that he to whom he gives a more abundant share in his cross always receives a greater share in his favors. And she should know she had a lot of crosses. And she also said, she wrote this to a nun who was suffering. This was to a nun, a person who was suffering painful desolations and interior trials. She said, "You ought, my dear sister, to be filled with love and gratitude at the great mercy and tenderness that the heart of Jesus feels for you. I recognize it still more clearly in all that you say in your letter, all that you look upon as the rigor of his justice. I regard as pledges of his loving kindness towards you. He intends by these means, so contrary to nature, to detach you from yourself and all created things, to render you entirely dependent on his grace, expecting everything from his assistance without placing your confidence or seeking a resource in yourself or neglecting whatever it may be in your power to do. Ah, my dear sister, if you could comprehend the burning charity of the heart of Jesus Christ towards you, you would see clearly that all his dealings with you proceed entirely from love. The insensibilities which you experience are but to teach you that to be more advanced in his love, you must become insensible to all created things, and especially to the movements of self-love. He wishes you to make the sacrifice of your will as often as he shall furnish you with the opportunity, until you have so completely destroyed it as to have no other will than that of his divine heart." It's a beautiful quote from St. Margaret Mary Alacoque. Always in any spiritual advice, it's always that this world is not the world in which we should pitch our tent, so to speak. It is a world in which we are here to practice virtue, to love God, to run the race, to do everything in order to lead a permanent life in heaven. That is the most fundamental aspect of the spiritual life. If you don't get that, you will not understand anything else about the Catholic religion or about the spiritual life. Detachment from the things of this world, seeing this world as of little importance, seeing it only as an opportunity in which to suffer with Christ as a form of participation in his sacrifice in order to gain heaven. That is it in a nutshell. Everything else is really explaining that principle. See, so that's a very important thing to understand in any of these spiritual conferences. That's always the underlying theme. So, St. Francis de Sales said, speaking to a religious, "You are a daughter of Jesus Christ crucified. Well then, how strange it would be if you did not partake in his cross." Same theme. St. Paul says, "My son, neglect not," this is in Hebrews, "neglect not the discipline of the Lord, neither be thou wearied, whilst thou art rebuked by him. For he whom the Lord loveth, he chastiseth," a very famous quote from St. Paul, "and he scourgeth every son whom he receiveth." So we have that almost contradictory idea that the more God loves us, the more we are going to be beset by problems. It's very hard to understand. You think that he would shower upon us all sorts of wonderful things because we love him. No, the opposite is true. In order to draw you away from the things of this world, material things, yourself, all the distractions of this world, and your own faults, in order to cure all those things, he's going to give you a lot of problems. See, so a lot to suffer. St. Paul continues, persevere under discipline. God dealeth with you as his sons. For what son is there whom the Father doth not correct? But if you be without chastisement, whereby all are made partakers, then you are bastards and not sons. St. Paul. St. Augustine, as God chastiseth every son whom he loves, if you seek to be exempt from the chastisements which are inflicted by the merciful Father, then you do not belong to the number of his children. Commenting on that very verse. Now, here are the reasons why we should not be troubled when we are afflicted by problems. The first is that the things of this world are not important. It's a very important thing to understand, that everything in this world passes away. It dies. It blows away. Nothing is permanent in this life. Very important to understand that. So we should not be attached to the things of this world, and by that not only material things, but pleasures, prestige, power, all of the other things that are actually more important to us, spiritual things, those things that you can't touch, but which you have, like power or honor or things like that. All right. So that's the first thing. We should have contempt, therefore, for the things of this world. Look down upon them as if not very important. The pagan historian Plutarch said, consider nothing which is human to be stable. In this way, he who is fortunate should not be overjoyed, nor he who is not fortunate excessively sad. He's a pagan. Trouble, the second reason is that trouble and pain help us to control our passions, which are so often the source of sin. So we learn to bear up with pain or bear up with being deprived of what we want. And that helps our passions, because our passions want to pursue something without any reference to the moral law. And they have to be bridled by the moral law. The third reason that we should have patience is that patience gives peace to the soul amid tribulations. So the patient person is always at peace. When you're impatient, you start getting upset, you're angry, you're thinking nasty thoughts about people and so forth. You're not at peace when you do that. Think of when you drive. One of the most, one of the greatest occasions of impatience, almost always venial, is when you drive. When somebody is going too slow, or somebody is going too fast, or somebody is in some way bothering you while you're driving. You're not at peace that way. There's an anger, and you're not at peace. But that's a very commonly confessed sin, is impatience in driving. But you can have impatience in all sorts of things. A drawer won't open, or a window won't open, or something goes wrong. It's true. And you see, and those first reactions tell you your spiritual life. That's Garrigo. Always look at your first reactions, not your second, where you think a little bit, but your first. That tells you the vices that need to be mortified. It tells you a lot about what's wrong inside. The fourth reason why we should be patient is the conviction that everything which we possess is in the hands of God and under the watch of providence. So we are submitted to God's providence, and that should cure our impatience. We have to thank God for what goes well. We have to bear up with what does not go well by his providence. Remember what St. Ignatius said about his order. And finally, the union of one's soul with God. As God is immutable and unable to suffer, he makes men patient and unites the just to himself. So our union with God will naturally inspire patience in us because he is the supremely patient one. And when you think of how many sins are being committed on this earth as we speak, it stinks like a rotten egg in the middle of the universe. Stinking, dripping with sin. And you would think, being God, he would just blow it up. Just get rid of it. As we probably would. It stinks of sin. You know, it's just something stank in your house. You would just throw it out. But he is supremely patient. And he's patient even with the just when they sin. Even those who are predestined to heaven. When they sin, he's patient. St. John Chrysostom said, there is nothing so bad as to have God as an adversary. Obviously. If he is present, no affliction, no trap, or any other thing can harm us. But just as a spark, if you put it in water, will be extinguished, although a great sadness of the mind, so also a great sadness of the mind will disappear and perish if it falls into a good conscience. No one is harmed except by himself. St. Gregory the Great said, the victory over cities is lesser, because the things which are subdued are external, which is much greater than that which is conquered by patience, because the mind itself is conquered by itself and subjects itself to itself. So patience is a very difficult thing to obtain, where you never give in to impatience. It's very, very difficult. It requires more strength to endure patiently adversities than to do actions which are quick and sudden. First, because adversities which come upon us seem greater than us, while he who performs a heroic act does it as if possessing strength, as being stronger than the obstacle before him. So if you do something that is very difficult, you do it with the presumption that you have the strength to do it. So it could be a heroic act. It could be saving somebody's life, for example. You presume that you have that strength, whereas when something comes upon you that you do not elect to do, a disease, some problem or a misfortune, a bad marriage, see, then you are have a feeling of weakness in front of it. How will I put up with this? So that's the first difference, that it requires more fortitude to bear up with something that comes upon you than to do something which you elect to do, even if it's difficult. Secondly, it requires more strength to patiently endure adversities. Secondly, because he who resists patiently adversities senses the dangers of the battle, whereas he who attacks a city sees the dangers as being remote. So if, in comparison to, say, attacking something, if you attack by your own will, you don't see the dangers in front of you. You are assuming, if you are attacking and not retreating, you are assuming that you have the strength to overcome those things. Whereas when something is put in front of you by providence, by circumstances, etc., you see the dangers, you see what is before you, what you have to bear up with. And it takes more fortitude to do that, to say, I will need to bear up with this, than it is to attack something that you feel that you can overcome. So, for example, when you are married and you figure out after 1 year of marriage, this whole thing was a terrible mistake. That is quite a sentence. See, the spouse is running off with somebody else, or is unfaithful, or doesn't go to work, or is a drunk. That takes a lot of long suffering and patience. And most people don't bear up, they get a divorce. Also, because in tribulations, the struggle has no interruption, whereas when an armed man attacks, there is ordinarily some interruption. So problems and difficulties and pains and diseases are usually without interruption. They're always there in front of you. Whereas when you are taking on some difficult project in front of you and you decide, I'm going to do this or that, or suffer this or that in order to obtain something, there are usually interruptions in the whatever is unpleasant. So it takes more fortitude to face what comes upon you. St. John Chrysostom says, to not seek revenge is to be like God. So to bear up with insults and all kinds of injuries is to be like God. St. Isidore said, it is a great virtue if you do not harm by him by whom you have been harmed. In other words, if you do not seek to harm back someone who has harmed you. He continues, great is that virtue of fortitude, if, even if you are harmed, you forgive. Great is the glory if you spare him whom you could harm. So we have to, if somebody insults us or in some way offends us, the virtue of patience would have you forgive and not return the harm. Anger, which patience tempers, would have you return the harm. See, anger is to overcome an inflicted evil. See, and there's ways of overcoming that. Usually, somehow pushing off the evil. See, that's anger, but also revenge is part of that. Is that if somebody does something nasty to you, well, then you do something nasty back to him. If he scratches your Tesla, you're going to go scratch his car. But you see, patience controls all that. It's a very difficult virtue and a very common sin. Saint Basil said, "My son, hold on to patience because it is the greatest virtue of the soul, in order that quickly you can ascend to the sublimity of perfection. Patience is a great remedy for the soul, whereas impatience is the poison of the heart." It's very true. Somebody who's always angry, always seeking revenge, and it is a poison that would eventually destroy your spiritual life. So and this is obviously the case with priests. People will attack you. They'll say a lot of nasty things about you. Right? There was one nun, for example, who was assigned to dealing with the parents who are not happy about this or that in the school, and we say that nun is going straight to heaven because they say all sorts of nasty things, and very, very. You'd be surprised, and people, sometimes most people are very nice to priests, but sometimes people are not very nice to priests, and that is among the faithful. And you have to be patient. It's you want to, of course, correct them, or if there's any kind of correction to be made, you do that, but you do it with patience and charity. So don't be surprised if people revile you because you're a Catholic priest, and more so because you're following the true faith. You're going to get a lot of flack. So you have to prepare for that and offer it up.